The third invitation Jesus gave us when calling us to become his disciples was to be a blessing to others. As we learn to be fishers of people, we learn to see our neighbors in new ways and to organize our lives so we have resources to serve others. Jesus sets the example in the Gospel of John as we read from the 13th chapter. I have given you an example to follow. Do as I have done to you. Jesus follows this instruction with a direct command to us in chapter 15. This is my commandment. Love each other in the same way I have loved you. There is no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friends. Jesus wasn't coming up with some new rule to love and serve our neighbors. Serving others and managing our lives so we have resources to help goes way back. Let's read from the book of Leviticus, chapter 19. When you harvest the crops of your land, do not harvest the grain along the edges of your fields, and do not pick up what the harvesters drop. It is the same with your grape crop. Do not strip every last bunch of grapes from the vines, and do not pick up the grapes that fall to the ground. Leave them for the poor and the foreigners living among you. I am the Lord your God. May the reading and hearing of God's word be blessed today. Amen.
This summer, our church has been asked to offer a religious emblem class for our scout troop. This is one of the ways the scouts earn badges and learn new skills for life. The group had its first meeting this week to get organized and to get to know each other. One of the activities for the scouts is reading their Bibles daily for 3 weeks. As they are reading their Bible, the program asks them to picture, ponder, and promise. They are to picture what is happening in their readings. They are to ponder what is happening and what it would look like if it were to happen today in our area, and to think about God's promise in what they're reading. As I was thinking about our disciples walking with Jesus and Simon and Andrew and the other early believers, I was doing a little bit of this practice that I'm teaching the scouts how to do. I was trying to think of what it looked like. And I was thinking about how they truly were literally walking. Back in that time, horses were for kings and for Roman leaders. Mules and camels were for transporting trade goods. So they walked. They walked everywhere. They often walked as many as 20 miles a day. And because of that, they were all in great shape. They were always walking, and in fact, they did not have chairs. There's one story that did not make it into the Bible about how Jesus started making some chairs as he was learning the trade from his father of building things. And his mother took one look and said, "Yeah, that's never going to take off." They had strong legs because they were always sitting on the floor and getting back up again. The other thing, as I was thinking about them walking along, I realized that, when you're walking down a pathway, your whole group can't talk to each other. You kind of break up into clumps of 2 and 3, and you have little conversations that are often very special with each other. And especially if you got Jesus that day, my guess is there was a lot of really great personalized instruction going on. This was a group of people that got to know each other really well through walking. Now in June, I went on a family vacation that involved walking. Here we all are on a bridge over the river Nahe in Germany. And one of the things that I also learned on this hike is that no two people walk at exactly the same pace. No two people bring the same stuff. All of our packs were completely different. And as I was picturing the people with Jesus, I figured a bunch of them had walking sticks, because the walking sticks help you nudge wild animals and dogs out of the way. They might protect you from robbers. They help distribute your weight as you're going. Very handy to have. Now, on my backpacking trips, I always take hiking sticks along as well. But I have a different reason. I have an ultralight tent that has no poles. And if I want my tent to stand up, I have to put my hiking sticks in there and then use some guy lines to pull it out. But it really saves several pounds on the back when I'm hiking. Now, on our hike, you can see a couple of us trying to get into one of our Airbnbs when the key did not lock or did not work in the door. Every one of us had a different type of backpack. We all had different things going on, and we each had brought unique items that were useful for the group. A ton of us had major problems with blisters because it was very hot and humid. And I had thought to bring along some of that kinesthetic tape that's popular these days, and I had big strips of it that they could just wrap around everything to help with their blisters. Someone else, my son, had a backpack that was not the highest quality. He had literally gone 5 steps into the hike and one of his buckles broke on his shoulder straps. By the end of the tour, his shoulder straps were literally tied to his pack. So after I fell down the mountain, I took a few days off. I was not on the trail, so my son was using my backpack for a few days. Someone also brought along a sun umbrella that you could clip onto your shoulder straps. And on the hot, dry days when we were going through areas without trees, that was a very popular item. Now, like the Scouts, we asked them, if you were going hiking, what would you take? And each person had different ideas of what they would pack. And I think when we are thinking about our spiritual journey with God, we each have our own lists of what we would take for our physical comfort and for our spiritual comfort. Some of us have perhaps a favorite camp stove or a favorite sleeping pad. Some of us have prayer beads or a small travel Bible that we like to take along. Now, we've been looking at this 3-part invitation that Jesus used to his beginning followers at the beginning of his ministry. And Jesus is offering that invitation to us today as well. We read in Matthew chapter 4, "Come, follow me," which is an invitation to belong, to give our lives to Jesus. "And I will show you." Jesus shows us how to become like him. And the last line, how to fish for people, how to become a blessing in the world just like Jesus was. The thing is, the first 2 lines are pretty easy to figure out, but this fishing for people had to sound strange the first time. Now, I'm standing up here right now and I'm realizing I forgot to bring my props with me that are still in my office. But when I was living in North Carolina while my husband was at Duke for seminary, we had a summer vacation out at the Outer Banks. Now, the Outer Banks are this thin strip of sand between the Atlantic Ocean and the continental United States. Some places it's very close to land. Some places it's so far out you can't actually see land. On the west side, between the sand islands and the continental US, there's an area called Pimlico Sound. And it's very shallow. There's lots of sea life that lives in there. And I was able to take a class that has one of those big fishing nets, kind of like the ones you see here. Big round things, and it has a rope coming from the middle, and there's weights all the way around the edge. And so you throw this rope, you hold onto the rope and you throw the net. You do not want to hold the net and throw the rope. It does not work that way. Hold the rope, throw the net, and it beautifully arcs out and settles on the water, and then the weight starts sinking around the edge. And after you let it sink down a ways, you pull the rope, and it has a whole bunch of fishing line that you can't see going through the net, and it pulls the weights together at the bottom. So all the fish are then caught inside, and you pull the whole net in. Now, this was very fun to learn. It was a beautiful day standing in ankle-deep water, throwing this out. It's mostly used for catching minnows to go bait fishing right now. But the instructor said, by the way, don't ever actually go fishing with this. It is illegal because it is so efficient. We would destroy all the fish stocks if we all fished like this all the time. But I'm guessing that Simon and Andrew, when Jesus said, "Come follow me," and they dropped everything and left, my guess is they have little travel fishnets that they probably stuck in a pocket. Because they're probably guys, they're like, I don't know if this guy's going to be able to feed us all the time. And my guess is they were always prepared to be able to catch their own dinner one way or the other. So I'm guessing that Simon and Andrew have a little net that they've got in their pockets to make sure that they could eat along the way. And that's fine for catching fish, but what does this have to do with fishing for people? I don't know about you, but I'm not very interested in being caught in a net and yanked out of the water. As I was thinking about this net that I did not bring for you to look at, but the net goes around and it gathers together, and then you can pull it in to be in one place together. And I think this is what Jesus is getting at when he asks us to come and learn how to fish for people. Jesus wants us to be gathering people together just as he did. He gathered Simon and Andrew. He gathered the 12. There are places we read about 70 or 72 disciples. And of course, there are times when there are hundreds and thousands of people listening and learning from Jesus. To cast a net far out, to encourage people to come together, to be gathered with God and community. I think that is what Jesus is calling us to do in this invitation. Jesus is not just offering a faith that is focused on an individual. Jesus wants to build a community of faith, a community that encourages and supports each other when we need help, a community that gets to walk together on a journey of faith. Now, sometimes it seems like the church really emphasizes a message of individual salvation and grace. And Jesus certainly does offer each one of us forgiveness and a place in heaven. But right here, and as we look as Jesus builds his ministry, it was never about the individuals only. It was always about the person being connected to the community. The people who were sick and poor, who had been excluded from community, Jesus saw them, Jesus talked to them, Jesus included them. So the first part of being fishers of people is that we learn to gather people together. Otherwise known in the church as evangelism, which I believe is all of our favorite word, right? I prefer the word outreach these days. Jesus calls us to build groups. And the thing about groups is that each person brings unique supplies and skills and abilities. Just as the scouts had their lists of what they like to bring on a journey, just like my family on our summer hiking trip, we all bring something different, and everything we bring is useful. As we think about gathering people together, I think we have to remember that Jesus invited a diverse group of people to follow him. Some of them were older, like Simon, who was most likely married already. Some of them were younger, like Andrew and some of the other disciples, who were probably only 18, 19, 20 years old. Some of them were fishermen. Some of them were tax collectors. Can you imagine the dusty walk down the road with Matthew, the tax collector, talking to Simon, the fisherman? My guess is they had not had a lot of conversations before that time. Jesus included men and women at a time when society kept them separated most of the time. Jesus made sure to gather everyone and anyone, and Jesus is calling us to do that as well. Because once we gather people together, Jesus wants each person to become a blessing to others. Jesus taught us how to serve people in need and how to live generously so we could all have enough. These two spiritual practices need a variety of people with a variety of skills and interests, because we can't be all doing the same service because the world does not have all the same needs. God calls each of us because we each have something to offer the community. Some of us are drawn to practices of healing or feeding, some to listening, some to building. Some of us show generosity through giving food to food pantries, others tithe to support our ministries. Now, there are many successful growing churches across the U.S. right now that are using a tool called SHAPE, and it helps people identify how God created each one of us and where God calls each of us to serve others. This SHAPE class, of course, the letters all stand for something, and so it helps people identify their spiritual gifts, their heart passions, their abilities, their personality, and their experiences. And many churches use this as part of their new member classes to help people see the best places that they can serve God and community. Jesus didn't call each of us to become the same as another follower. Jesus called each of us to bring our unique gifts and experiences to God's faith community. So after we gather people together, we then train each person to be the person God created them to be and to serve and give in their unique way. On our spiritual walk with Jesus, we will each walk at our own pace, thank goodness, and we will chat with small groups of people along the way, and we're going to bring our own favorite items. Jesus gives us the example to follow as we read in John 13 today, and Jesus is right there with us every step. But Jesus wants each of us to use the gifts God gave us to serve in the way we were meant to serve, not to copy someone else. John chapter 15 reminds us to live a life of love, which is also about living in community. If we're not in community, we don't have a lot of people to love. As fishers of people, we are gathering people together so that we can love them. And as we gather them together, we look for ways to share a portion of our resources for people who are not a part of our group yet. And this is where the Leviticus reading reminds us to always leave a little bit to share with those who need a little bit. The story of Ruth is an excellent example of this life of generosity. Boaz, as the landowner, always told his workers, leave some of the grain in the field for someone who comes along. Ruth and Naomi, after the death of their husbands, had traveled back to the land of Judah, and they were hungry. And Ruth was able to go and gather food from Boaz's field when she and Naomi had nothing. Eventually, Ruth met Boaz, and they got married, and they became ancestors in the family line of Jesus. Boaz lived faithfully with generosity, and he was able to bless generations to come. Now, just this morning, I was thinking about a conversation I had with some folks yesterday, and they were talking about, they've got little kids, they've got a camper, they were driving a long way, and they stopped at Walmart to sleep in the parking lot. I don't know how many of you know this, but Walmart has a company policy nationwide that anyone can park in the parking lot and sleep overnight, as long as it's okay with the city. There are a couple cities that have said, yeah, no. But almost all Walmarts, and I've done this myself, and this is an example of taking from your resources and being able to share with someone when they need a place to sleep. There are so many ways that we can serve and so many ways that we can give. This year, I encourage us all to think about this invitation that Jesus is giving us and to grab our hiking poles or our fishing nets or whatever our favorite supplies are and to hit the road with Jesus. Come, learn from Jesus, become Jesus, belong to Jesus, and be a blessing through service and generosity to the people that Jesus is gathering. Let us find our heart passions so we can serve as Jesus wants us to serve. Amen.